In the heart of Manhattan, where the city's pulse thrummed with ambition and dreams, the 35th floor of the Sterling Tower gleamed under the soft glow of a crescent moon. The night was deep, its velvet darkness pierced by the glittering skyline, a constellation of steel and glass that stretched toward the heavens. Inside a corner office, where polished oak met sleek chrome, Raphael Dawn sat alone, a solitary figure amidst the opulence of his law firm. His desk, a mahogany expanse, was strewn with legal briefs, their pages whispering of cases won and battles yet to come. The faint hum of his laptop mingled with the distant siren song of New York City, a symphony of chaos that felt foreign and familiar to his restless heart. Raphael, a white American man of 32, was no stranger to the weight of success. His sharp jawline, framed by a meticulously trimmed beard and piercing blue eyes, had become as much a part of his legend as his legal acumen. He was a name whispered in the hallowed halls of Wall Street and the Southern District of New York courtrooms, a lawyer whose brilliance was matched only by his unrelenting drive. His suits, tailored to perfection, draped over his athletic frame like a second skin, each stitch a testament to his ascent from a small-town boy in upstate New York to a titan of the legal world. Yet beneath the polished exterior was a void, a hollow ache that no victory in court could fill. 7 years ago, his world had shattered. Cassandra Lopez, a black American woman whose radiant smile once lit up his every dawn, had vanished from his life like a star snuffed out by a merciless night. She was his muse, his confidant, the woman he had vowed to marry under a canopy of love and promises. They had planned a life together, their dreams woven into late-night conversations over coffee in Greenwich Village, their laughter echoing through Central Park's winding paths. But she was gone 1 week before their wedding. No call, no letter, no trace. The absence was a wound that refused to heal, its edges raw and jagged, bleeding into every quiet moment of his existence. Raphael's fingers traced the edge of a legal brief, but his mind wandered to that fateful summer. He could still see Cassandra's ebony curls cascading over her shoulders, her deep brown eyes sparkling with dreams as vast as the Hudson River. She had been his anchor, her voice a melody that soothed his restless soul. They had danced in the rain outside her Brooklyn apartment, her laughter mingling with the patter of droplets, her warmth grounding him in a world that felt infinite. But then, silence. Her family, tight-lipped and distant, offered no answers. He had searched for her, scouring every corner of the city, from the jazz clubs of Harlem to the quiet bookstores of the Lower East Side. But she was a ghost lost to him forever. The pain had reshaped him. The Raphael who once laughed freely, who believed in love's enduring promise, was gone. In his place was Attorney Dawn, a man whose name struck fear in opposing counsel, whose icy demeanor in the courtroom was as sharp as the gavel's strike. He buried himself in work, each case a fortress against the memories that haunted him. His law firm, Dawn and Associates, was a beacon of prestige, with clients ranging from Wall Street moguls to tech tycoons in Silicon Alley. Yet, as he sat in his office, the city's lights winking at him through floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt the weight of his solitude. No one awaited him in his sleek Upper East Side apartment, and there was no reason to rush home. The world saw a man who had it all: looks, brains, influence. But Raphael knew the truth. His heart was a locked vault, its key lost in the ashes of a love long gone. The clock on his desk ticked past midnight, its rhythm a quiet rebuke to his relentless pace. He leaned back in his leather chair, the city's skyline a silent witness to his thoughts. A photograph tucked away in a drawer called to him. He resisted at first, but the pull was too strong. With a sigh, he opened the drawer and lifted the frame, its edges worn from years of secret glances. There they were, Raphael and Cassandra, frozen in joy at a rooftop party in Soho. Her smile was a burst of sunlight, her arms wrapped around him like the world could never tear them apart. He traced her face with his fingertip, a pang of longing twisting in his chest. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, swallowed by the office's silence. He set the frame down, shaking his head as if to dislodge the memories. Work was his refuge, his salvation. He turned back to his laptop, the screen glowing with the details of a high-profile corporate merger. Numbers, clauses, and precedents danced before his eyes, a language he spoke fluently. But even as he immersed himself in the case, a part of him lingered in that summer 7 years ago, when love had felt eternal, when Cassandra's laughter had been his home. The city outside pulsed on, indifferent to his quiet grief, its lights a reminder of a life he could never reclaim. Yet a spark of curiosity flickered in the depths of his solitude. What had driven Cassandra away? Was it fear, betrayal, or something darker? He had stopped asking those questions years ago, but tonight they stirred again, like embers in a dying fire. He closed his laptop, the screen fading to black, and stood to face the window. Manhattan stretched before him, a labyrinth of dreams and despair. Somewhere out there, he thought, was the answer to the mystery that had broken him. And though he dared not hope, a whisper in his heart wondered if fate might one day bring her back. The night wore on, and Raphael remained at his desk, a solitary star in the constellation of New York, his heart caught between the past and the present, between the man he was and the man he might yet become. The morning sun cast golden threads across the marble floors of the Southern District Court of New York, where Raphael Dawn stood like a sentinel, his presence commanding the room. Clad in a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light, he was a figure of unyielding resolve, his blue eyes sharp as they scanned the courtroom. The air was thick with anticipation, the gallery filled with reporters from the New York Times and Bloomberg Law, their pens poised to capture every word. Raphael's client, a tech executive accused of insider trading, sat beside him, his fate hanging in the balance. But for Raphael, this was more than a case. It was a battlefield where truth and justice were his only allies. Objection. Your Honor, Raphael's voice cut through the courtroom, clear and resonant, like a blade slicing through doubt. The prosecution's claim is speculative and lacks foundation. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, nodded. Sustained, she declared, her gavel a punctuation mark to Raphael's precision. He stood taller, his posture impeccable, his expression a mask of calm authority. To the world, he was Attorney Dawn, the lawyer who never faltered, whose arguments were as unassailable as the skyscrapers of Manhattan. But beneath the surface, his heart beat with a quiet storm, its rhythm shaped by a past he could not escape. The hearing concluded with the prosecution's case weakened, and Raphael stepped out into the courthouse's grand foyer where a swarm of reporters awaited. Mr. Dawn, any comment on the insider trading allegations? One called, shoving a microphone toward him. Is it true you rejected a $25 million settlement? Another pressed. Raphael's face remained impassive, his stride unbroken as he moved through the crowd, his briefcase a shield against their questions. He had no time for the clamor of the press, no patience for their hunger for scandal. His world was one of facts, evidence, and the relentless pursuit of victory. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor near Foley Square. Raphael paused, his breath visible in the cool morning, and glanced at his phone. A notification blinked on the screen, a reminder of what would have been his and Cassandra's anniversary 7 years ago today. The sight of it was a dagger to his chest, sharp and sudden, cutting through the armor he had built. He could still feel her hand in his, the warmth of her touch, as they strolled through Brooklyn's Dumbo district, her laughter a melody that drowned out the city's noise. But that was another life, another Raphael, who believed in forever. He slipped the phone into his pocket and continued down the steps, ignoring the whispers of three women in business attire who lingered nearby. One, a PR executive from a luxury brand, called out, "Mr. Don, we'd love to discuss a feature in Vogue, a legal podcast." Her smile was polished, her tone hopeful, but Raphael offered only a curt nod. He said, "My schedule's whole," his voice polite but distant, a fortress gate slamming shut. He was used to the attention offers for TV appearances, magazine covers, charity dinners at the Met, but he wanted none. His life was his work, his heart a closed book, its pages sealed against the world. Back at his office in Sterling Tower, the city's skyline shimmered through the windows, a canvas of ambition and dreams. Raphael's assistant, a sharp young woman named Emily, greeted him with messages. "Sir, you've got a request from the New York Legal Aid Society," she said, her tone urgent. "They're requesting help with a pro bono case in upstate New York. It's a land dispute in Rochester. Sensitive, urgent, and no one else will touch it." Raphael frowned his fingers, pausing over a contract. "I've already met my pro bono quota," he replied, his voice cool, but Emily pressed on. "They say it's different, sir. Local government anomalies, possible illegal evictions of farmers, primarily Black and Latino communities. It's messy." Raphael leaned back, his gaze drifting to the skyline. Rochester was a world away from Manhattan's polished chaos, a place of rolling fields and quiet towns, where the roar of progress often drowned out the struggles of the marginalized. He had no reason to take the case, no obligation to step into a fight that wasn't his. Yet something stirred within him, a whisper of purpose, that felt foreign and familiar. Perhaps the echo of Cassandra's ideals. Her fierce belief in justice for all tugged at his soul. Or maybe it was the chance to escape the sterile confines of his life, to feel something beyond the numbness that had settled in his bones. "Fine," he said at last, his voice low but resolute. "Set up a meeting with the legal aid team. I'll hear them out." Emily nodded, her eyes bright with surprise, and hurried to make the arrangements. Raphael turned to the window, the city sprawling before him like a map of his heart, beautiful, complex, and full of secrets. He thought of Cassandra, her voice echoing in his mind. Justice must be served, and everyone must be equal. Those words, once a shared creed, now felt like a challenge, a call to reclaim the man he had once been. As he prepared for the journey to Rochester, Raphael felt a flicker of anticipation, a spark that had long been dormant. The case was a mystery, its stakes unknown, but it promised something more than another courtroom victory. It promised a chance to confront the shadows of his past, to find answers to questions he had buried deep. With a final glance at the photograph in his drawer, Cassandra's smile a beacon in the darkness, he closed it gently, as if sealing a promise to himself. Whatever lay ahead in Rochester, he would face it not as Attorney Don, but as Raphael, the man who still carried a heart that refused to forget. The train to Rochester cut through the autumnal heart of upstate New York, its wheels humming a soft lullaby against the tracks. Raphael Don sat by the window, his reflection a ghostly silhouette against the rolling tapestry of golden fields and crimson maples. The city's frenetic pulse, the gleaming spires of Manhattan, felt like a distant dream, now replaced by the quiet vastness of a world untouched by skyscrapers. His charcoal suit, so at home in the polished courtrooms of the Southern District, seemed almost out of place here, a relic of a life that thrived on control and certainty. Yet as the train wound through the Hudson Valley, Raphael felt a stirring in his chest, a whisper of something new that beckoned him beyond the confines of his carefully constructed existence. He had agreed to the pro bono case on a whim, or so he told himself. The New York Legal Aid Society's request had come when his heart, weary from years of solitude, craved a purpose beyond corporate mergers and courtroom victories. The case was messy. They had said land disputes in Rochester, allegations of illegal evictions, targeting Black and Latino farmers, and a local government tangled in whispers of corruption. No other lawyer would touch it, wary of its political thorns and the shadowy influence of influential figures. But Raphael, for reasons he could not fully name, had said yes. Perhaps the echo of Cassandra's voice, her fierce belief in justice, that once burned brightly in their shared dreams, nudged him toward this unknown path. Rochester greeted him with a crisp breeze carrying the scent of earth and harvest. The town was a study in contrasts. Quaint brick buildings lined Main Street, their facades weathered by time, while beyond the town's edges stretched fields of corn and wheat, swaying like a sea under the October sky. Raphael stepped off the train, his leather briefcase in hand, and was met by a volunteer from the Legal Aid Society, a young woman named Sarah, with a determined glint in her eyes. "Mr. Don, thank you for coming," she said, her voice warm but tinged with urgency. "This case, it's more than land. It's people's lives, their heritage. The farmers here are being pushed out, and no one is fighting for them." As they drove to the community center, a modest wooden structure nestled between a church and a grain silo, Sarah briefed him on the details. The farmers, many from multi-generational Black and Latino families, had been served eviction notices by a shadowy corporation tied to a New York real estate magnate. Forged titles, coerced consents, and intimidation by local officials had left the community fractured, their trust eroded. Raphael listened, his lawyer's mind already sifting through the legal threads, but his heart felt the weight of their stories. These were not just clients, they were families, like the one he had once dreamed of building with Cassandra, now a distant memory that clung to him like the scent of rain. The community center buzzed with quiet tension. Farmers gathered in small clusters, their faces etched with worry and defiance, their hands calloused from years of tending the land. Raphael stood at the front, his presence a beacon of hope in a despairing room. He introduced himself, his voice steady but warm, promising to fight for their rights. As he spoke, his eyes scanned the crowd, landing on a small figure near the water dispenser. A boy, no more than 6, with skin of rich mahogany and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. The boy wore a school uniform, a navy polo with the Rochester crest, and clutched a stack of note cards, his fingers moving with the confidence of someone far beyond his years. "Hello, sir," the boy said, stepping forward with a boldness that caught Raphael off guard. "Are you the lawyer from New York City? The one they say is the best?" His voice was clear, his smile infectious, and Raphael felt a pang in his chest, as if the boy's words had unlocked a door, long sealed. "I'm Raphael Don," he replied, kneeling slightly to meet the boy's gaze. "And you are Caleb Lopez," the boy answered, standing tall, his note cards held like a badge of honor. "I'm giving the welcome speech at our school's anniversary tomorrow, and one day I will be a lawyer too, because justice must be served and everyone must be equal." The words hit Raphael like a tidal wave, pulling him back to a rooftop in Soho, where Cassandra had spoken those exact words. Her voice, a melody of conviction. His breath caught his heart stuttering as he studied Caleb's face, the curve of his smile, and the spark in his eyes so familiar. "You're a smart kid, Caleb." Raphael said, his voice softer now, tinged with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Who taught you that?" Caleb grinned, his pride evident. "My mom. She's a teacher and says that's the most important thing, making things fair for everyone." Raphael's mind raced, a storm of questions swirling. "Lopez. Could it be?" He shook his head, dismissing the thought as a coincidence. but the seed of doubt had been planted, its roots curling deep into his soul. As the meeting continued, Raphael reviewed documents, land titles, eviction notices, affidavits from farmers who spoke of late-night threats and forged signatures. His lawyer's instincts kicked in, analyzing patterns, but his thoughts drifted to Caleb. The boy had wandered to a corner, practicing his speech, his voice rising and falling with a cadence that echoed Cassandra's. Raphael's heart ached, a quiet longing that threatened to unravel the control he had so carefully maintained. He forced himself to focus, but Caleb's presence lingered, a spark in the darkness of his solitude. That night, in a modest inn overlooking Lake Ontario, Raphael sat by the window, the lake's surface shimmering under the moonlight. He thought of Cassandra, her laughter, her strength, the way she had once believed in him. Caleb's words echoed in his mind, a haunting refrain that stirred memories he had buried deep. Was it possible? Could Caleb be a bridge to the past? A clue to the mystery of Cassandra's disappearance? The questions burned, but answers remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of a town far from the city he called home. As he closed his eyes, the wind carried the scent of lake water and pine, whispering of possibilities yet to unfold. Rochester was more than a case. It was a journey, a chance to confront the ghosts of his past. And somewhere in the heart of this quiet town, Raphael sensed that fate was weaving a new thread that might lead him back to the love he had lost. The morning sun bathed Rochester in a golden glow, its rays dancing across the fields and casting long shadows over the town's modest streets. Raphael Dawn stood outside the Rochester Community School, a quaint red brick building adorned with banners for its anniversary celebration. The air buzzed with excitement. Children's laughter mingled with the chatter of parents, the scent of fresh-baked cookies wafting from a nearby tent. Raphael adjusted his tie, his heart a tangle of anticipation and unease. He had come to support Caleb, the boy whose bright eyes and bold dreams had stirred something deep within him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that today held more than a school event. It felt like a reckoning. The gymnasium was a kaleidoscope of color, with balloons swaying in the breeze and a stage draped in blue and gold. Raphael sat in the VIP section, drawing curious glances from locals unaccustomed to Manhattan's polished elite. He scanned the crowd, searching for Caleb, but his thoughts were a whirlpool, pulling him back to the boy's words. Justice must be served, and everyone must be equal. The phrase was a ghost from his past, an echo of Cassandra Lopez, the woman who had once been his everything. He had tried to bury her memory, to lock it away with the pain of her abandonment, but Caleb's voice had cracked open that vault, letting hope and doubt spill free. The ceremony began with applause, and Caleb took the stage, his small frame radiating confidence. Clad in a crisp navy uniform, he stood like a young orator, his note cards clutched tightly, but his voice steady. "Good morning, everyone." He began, his smile as bright as the sun outside. "Today isn't just a celebration of our school. It's a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference, to stand up for what's right." The crowd cheered, but Raphael's breath caught. Caleb's cadence, his passion, the way he tilted his head, it was as if Cassandra herself stood before him, her spirit alive in this child. As Caleb continued quoting his mother's wisdom, "You don't need wealth to matter. You need to be true to your principles." Raphael's heart pounded. He gripped the edge of his seat, his lawyer's mind racing to connect the dots. Could Caleb be hers? Could he be theirs? The thought was a spark igniting a fire of longing and fear. He had spent 7 years convincing himself that Cassandra was gone forever, that her love had been a lie. But now, in this small-town gymnasium, the past felt achingly close, its weight pressing against his chest. When Caleb finished, the crowd erupted, and Raphael clapped mechanically, his eyes scanning the room. And then he saw her. At the edge of the stage, a woman in a white blouse and tailored black slacks, her ebony curls pinned elegantly. Her presence, a quiet storm of grace and strength. Cassandra Lopez. The sight of her was a thunderbolt splitting his world in two. She was older now, her features softened by time, but her eyes, those deep brown pools that had once held his dreams, were unmistakable. She knelt to hug Caleb, her smile radiant, and Raphael's heart stuttered, torn between joy and pain. He stood, his legs moving before his mind could catch up, drawn to her like a moth to a flame. As he approached, the crowd faded, the noise dimming to a distant hum. Cassandra looked up, and their eyes met, a collision of past and present that stopped time itself. "Raphael," she whispered, her voice trembling, a mix of shock and something more profound, regret perhaps, or fear. "What are you doing here?" The question stung, but Raphael's voice was steady, though his heart raced. "I'm here for the case, the farmers." "But, Cassandra, is Caleb yours?" The words spilled out raw and unguarded, carrying 7 years of unspoken questions. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, a flicker of defiance masking her pain. "Yes, he's my son," she said, her tone sharp but brittle. "But you need to stay away, Raphael. We're done. You don't get to walk back into our lives." Her words were a blade cutting through the fragile hope he had dared to feel. But Raphael pressed on, his voice softening, laced with the ache of years lost. "Cassandra, I didn't leave you. I was framed, imprisoned for something I didn't do. I searched for you, but you were gone." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading for truth. "Why did you leave? And Caleb, is he—" "Don't," she cut him off, her voice a whisper, now trembling with emotion. "Don't do this, Raphael. Not here. Not now." She glanced at Caleb, who was laughing with friends nearby, oblivious to the storm between them. "Caleb is my son and his father. It's not you." Her words were firm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, a crack in her resolve that Raphael couldn't ignore. He wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the pain in her eyes stopped him. He saw the weight she carried, the strength it took to stand there, a single mother, in a world that judged her harshly. "Cassandra," he said softly, "I want the truth. After all these years, don't I deserve that?" She turned away, her shoulders trembling, and for a moment he thought she might break. But she straightened, her voice cold. "You deserve nothing from me. Please leave us alone." Raphael stood frozen as she walked away, her figure blending into the crowd. His heart was a battlefield, torn between anger and longing, between the need to know and the fear of what that knowledge might bring. Caleb's laughter echoed behind him, a reminder of the boy who had stirred this storm. Raphael glanced at him, the boy's smile a mirror of Cassandra's, and the questions burned brighter. Was she lying to protect him? Or was the truth more painful than he could bear? Raphael lingered at the edges as the celebration continued, his mind a whirl of memories. He saw Cassandra in every corner of his past, their walks along the Brooklyn Bridge, her hand in his as they planned a future that never came. He remembered the day he was arrested, the cold steel of handcuffs, the fabricated charges of economic fraud orchestrated by her father, Emilio Lopez, a real estate tycoon whose shadow loomed over their love. Raphael had spent a year in prison, his name tarnished, his heart broken, believing Cassandra had abandoned him. But now, seeing her here alive and fierce, he wondered if he had been wrong. He left the gymnasium, the weight of the encounter pressing against him. The lakefront stretched before him, its waters a mirror of his turmoil. He thought of Caleb, of the boy's dreams, and the uncanny echo of Cassandra's ideals. The possibility that Caleb was his son was a flame he couldn't extinguish, a hope he dared not fully embrace. Raphael made a silent vow as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Rochester in shades of amber and violet. He would fight for the farmers and for justice, but he would also seek the truth about Cassandra and Caleb, no matter the cost. The night closed in the stars above Rochester, whispering secrets of their own. Raphael stood alone, caught between the past and the promise of answers, his heart beating with the rhythm of a love that refused to die. The twilight over Rochester painted the sky in hues of amber and violet, the last rays of sunlight glinting off the Genesee River as it wound through the town's heart. Raphael Don stood outside the community center, his breath visible in the crisp autumn air, his heart a tempest of emotions stirred by the encounter that had shaken his world. Cassandra Lopez, the woman who had once been his sun and stars, had stood before him only hours ago, her eyes a mirror of pain and defiance. Her words, "Caleb is my son and his father." "It's not you," echoed in his mind, each syllable a shard of glass, piercing the fragile hope he had dared to nurture. Yet, as he gazed at the river's shimmering surface, Raphael could not shake the certainty that her denial hid a more profound truth that tied their past to the boy whose smile had awakened memories long buried. The community center was quiet now, its wooden walls bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Inside, Raphael had spent the day poring over documents, land titles, eviction notices, affidavits from farmers whose lives had been upended by a faceless corporation. The case was a labyrinth of deceit, its threads leading to a shadowy figure whose influence loomed over Rochester like a storm cloud. But it was not the legal complexities that consumed him tonight. It was Cassandra, her presence, her voice, the way her eyes had flickered with something unspoken when she spoke of Caleb. Raphael's heart ached with the weight of 7 years lost, of a love that had once felt eternal, now fractured by time and secrets. He walked back to the inn where he was staying, a quaint establishment overlooking Lake Ontario, its weathered charm starkly contrasting the sleek sterility of his Manhattan life. The lobby was warm, filled with the scent of cedar and the soft crackle of a fireplace. Raphael settled into a leather armchair, his briefcase at his side, but his thoughts were far from the case. He saw Cassandra in every shadow, the curve of her smile, the strength in her posture, the way she had shielded Caleb from his questions. He remembered their nights in Brooklyn, when they would sit on her fire escape sharing dreams under a sky dusted with stars. She had been his confidant, her laughter, a melody that soothed his restless soul. But then, the darkness had come, his arrest, the false charges of economic fraud, the years spent in a prison cell, orchestrated by her father, Emilio Lopez, a real estate magnate whose ambition knew no bounds. Raphael's fingers tightened around the armrest, his jaw clenching as he recalled the betrayal. Emilio had torn them apart, fabricating evidence to imprison him, convincing Cassandra that Raphael had abandoned her. The pain of that year had hardened him, forging the cold, unyielding attorney Don, who dominated courtrooms. But seeing Cassandra today, her beauty undimmed by time, her strength tempered by motherhood, had cracked that armor. And Caleb, his bright eyes, his bold declaration of justice, felt like a piece of Raphael's own heart, a possibility he could not dismiss. The next morning, Raphael returned to the community center, where the farmers gathered with renewed hope. Sarah, the legal aid volunteer, handed him a stack of new documents, her face tense. "These came from a whistleblower," she said, her voice low. "They're explosive, Raphael. Evidence of forged land titles, bank transfers through shell companies, and orders signed by someone high up, someone untouchable. Raphael's eyes scanned the pages, his lawyer's mind dissecting the details. The corporation behind the evictions was a front, its transactions leading back to a name he had hoped never to see again, Emilio Lopez. The revelation was a thunderbolt, connecting the past to the present with chilling clarity. Emilio, who had destroyed his life 7 years ago, was now the architect of Rochester's suffering. The documents detailed a scheme to seize farmland for a luxury resort development, using falsified consents and intimidation to displace Black and Latino families who had tilled the land for generations. Raphael's blood ran cold, but his resolve hardened. This was no longer just a case. It was personal, a chance to confront the man who had stolen his future and to protect the people who reminded him of the ideals he and Cassandra once shared. Raphael's thoughts drifted to Caleb as he worked through the day meeting with farmers and strategizing with Sarah. The boy had appeared briefly at the center, dropping off a flyer for a school fundraiser, his smile as bright as ever. "You're coming, right, Mr. Raphael?" Caleb had asked, his voice full of hope. Raphael had nodded, unable to resist the boy's infectious enthusiasm, but his heart was heavy with questions. Was Caleb his son? The timeline fit 7 years since Cassandra's disappearance, the boy's age, the uncanny resemblance in his spirit. But Cassandra's denial lingered, a barrier he couldn't breach. Raphael walked along the lakefront that evening, the water lapping gently against the shore. The sky was a canvas of stars, their light a reminder of the nights he and Cassandra had spent dreaming of a life together. He could still feel her hand in his, the warmth of her touch, as they planned their wedding, their future. "Justice must be served," she had said, her voice fierce with conviction, "and everyone must be equal." Those words, now echoed by Caleb, were a bridge across time, linking the man he was to the boy who might be his legacy. He stopped at a bench, the cold wood grounding him, as he pulled out his phone. A photo saved from years ago stared back at him. Cassandra, at a jazz club in Harlem, her eyes alight with joy. He traced her face, his heart aching with a love that refused to fade. "Why did you lie?" he whispered to the night, the question, a prayer and a plea. He knew he couldn't force the truth from her, but could fight for the farmer's Caleb's world and the justice that had once bound them. As the stars shimmered above, Raphael made a silent vow he would uncover Emilio's crimes, protect Rochester's heart, and find a way to reach Cassandra, to heal the wounds that time had deepened. The night stretched on the lake's whispers, a lullaby to his restless soul. Raphael stood his resolve, a beacon in the darkness, ready to face the shadows of truth that awaited him. The dawn broke over Rochester with a quiet grace, its light filtering through the mist that clung to the fields, casting a dreamlike glow over the town. Raphael Dawn stood at the edge of a cornfield, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth, starkly contrasting the urban armor he wore in Manhattan's courtrooms. The air was heavy with the scent of soil and dew, a reminder of the lives rooted in this land, lives now threatened by the greed of a man whose shadow had haunted Raphael for years. Emilio Lopez's name pulsed in his mind, a dark thread weaving together the pain of his past and the battle he now faced. But amidst the weight of that truth, another fire was burning within him, a longing to understand the boy who had captured his heart and the woman who still held it. The community center was a hive of activity, its walls echoing with the voices of farmers determined to reclaim their land. Raphael sat at a worn wooden table, surrounded by documents that told a story of betrayal, forged titles, illicit bank transfers, and memos signed by Emilio's proxies. Each page was a puzzle piece, revealing a scheme to transform Rochester's fertile fields into a sprawling resort for the elite. But the whistleblower's affidavit sent a chill down Raphael's spine. It named Emilio the mastermind, detailing how he had bribed local officials and intimidated farmers, his influence a web that ensnared the town. Raphael's jaw tightened, his fingers tracing a man's signature who had once destroyed his life. This was more than a case. It was a chance to right a wrong, to reclaim the justice that had been stolen from him and Cassandra. As he worked, Caleb appeared at the center, his school backpack slung over one shoulder, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Mr. Raphael, you're still here," he exclaimed, bounding toward him. "Are you going to save the farmers?" Raphael smiled, his heart softening at the boy's earnestness. "I'm trying, Caleb," he said, ruffling the boy's hair. "It's a big fight, but we'll do it together." Caleb grinned, pulling out a drawing, a stick-figure lawyer in a suit standing before a crowd. "That's you," he said proudly. "Mom says you're like a superhero for justice." The mention of Cassandra sent a pang through Raphael's chest. He saw her and Caleb's smile in the tilt of his head, in the unwavering belief that right could triumph over might. "Your mom's pretty clever," Raphael said, his voice low-laced with a tenderness he hadn't felt in years. Caleb nodded, then hesitated, his eyes searching Raphael's. "Do you know my mom? She's the best teacher ever." Raphael's breath caught the question, a spark that threatened to ignite the truth. "I knew someone like her once," he said carefully, his heart racing. She was special too. As Raphael returned to the documents, Caleb's question lingered, but his focus wavered. He saw Cassandra in every memory, her laughter in a Brooklyn cafe, her hand in his as they danced under the stars. He had spent 7 years believing she had left him, but her words at the school anniversary, "I didn't leave you, you left me," had cracked that certainty. Had Emilio lied to her too, weaving a web of deceit to keep them apart? The thought was a flame burning away the numbness that had defined him, replacing it with a fierce need to know. That afternoon, Raphael met with the farmers, their stories pouring out like a river breaking free. There was Maria, a grandmother whose family had farmed the land for generations, her voice trembling as she spoke of bulldozers tearing through her fields. There was Javier, a young father whose children played in the same fields his grandfather had sown, now facing eviction. Their pain was a mirror to Raphael's own, a reminder of the life he had lost when Emilio's schemes tore him from Cassandra. He promised them justice, his voice steady but burning with conviction, and they nodded, their eyes alight with hope. As the sun set, Raphael drove to a local diner, its neon sign a beacon in the dusk. He sat in a corner booth, the scent of coffee and fried onions filling the air, and opened his laptop. The whistleblower's documents were a goldmine, but they needed corroboration. He sent an encrypted email to a contact in Manhattan, a private investigator, who could dig deeper into Emilio's financials. As he typed, a shadow fell across the table. He looked up to find Caleb accompanied by a volunteer holding a flyer for a community fundraiser. "Mr. Raphael, you gotta come to this," Caleb said, his enthusiasm infectious. "It's for the school, and Mom's organizing it. There'll be music and pie." Raphael chuckled, the boy's energy a balm to his weary soul. "I'll try, Caleb," he said, his eyes softening. "Your mom must be proud of you." Caleb beamed, then hesitated, his voice dropping. "She's been sad lately. She'd like you to come." The words struck Raphael like a chord, resonating with the pain he had seen in Cassandra's eyes. He nodded, promising to attend, and watched as Caleb left, his slight figure disappearing into the evening. Alone again, Raphael's thoughts turned to the fundraiser. It was a chance to see Cassandra, to bridge the chasm between them. But it was also a risk, a step into the unknown that could shatter the fragile hope he clung to. He thought of their past, of the nights they had spent planning a future that never came. He remembered the moment he was arrested, the cold bite of handcuffs, Emilio's smug face in the courtroom. The memory fueled his resolve, but Caleb's smile, Cassandra's echo, gave him courage. As he left the diner, the stars above Rochester glimmered like promises, each one a whisper of possibility. Raphael drove back to the inn, the road winding through fields that seemed to hold their breath, waiting for justice. He knew the fight against Emilio would be brutal, a clash of wills that could cost him everything. But he also knew the answers he sought lay somewhere in this town, in the heart of a woman he had never stopped loving. And for Caleb, Cassandra, and the man he had once been, Raphael, would face the fire no matter the cost. The Rochester dawn broke with a tender blush, painting the fields in hues of rose and gold, as if the earth itself were whispering promises of hope. Raphael Dawn stood at the edge of the community center's parking lot, his breath mingling with the morning mist, his heart a battlefield of resolve and yearning. The weight of the legal fight against Emilio Lopez, who had orchestrated his ruin 7 years ago, pressed heavily upon him. Still, the image of Caleb Lopez, his bright eyes, his infectious smile, anchored him to this place. With his unwavering belief in justice, the boy was a beacon in the storm of Raphael's past, a reminder of the love he had lost, and the possibility he dared not fully embrace. Inside the community center, the air was thick with the scent of coffee and the quiet determination of the farmers. Raphael sat at a worn table, surrounded by stacks of documents, forged land titles, bank records, and the whistleblower's affidavit named Emilio as the architect of Rochester's suffering. The evidence was damning, a tapestry of deceit, woven with precision. But Raphael knew that confronting a man of Emilio's power would require more than paperwork. It would demand courage, strategy, and a heart unafraid to face the shadows of its own history. As he reviewed the case, Caleb burst into the room, his school uniform slightly askew, his backpack bouncing with every step. "Mr. Raphael," he called, his voice a burst of sunlight in the room's somber air. "I made you something." He thrust a folded piece of paper into Raphael's hands, a drawing of a courtroom with a stick-figure lawyer, unmistakably Raphael, with a suit and a confident stance, standing before a cheering crowd. Caleb said, "That's you winning for the farmers." His eyes were sparkling. Raphael's heart softened, a warmth spreading like the first rays of dawn. "You're going to be a great lawyer someday, Caleb," he said, his voice low, laced with an affection he hadn't felt in years. Caleb grinned, then hesitated, his small hand tugging at Raphael's sleeve. "Will you come to my school fundraiser this weekend? Mom's organizing it, and it's going to be awesome. There'll be music and games." Raphael's breath caught at the mention of Cassandra. The thought of seeing her again after their tense confrontation at the school anniversary was both a balm and a blade. He wanted to bridge the chasm between them, to unravel the truth about Caleb, but her words, "You don't get to walk back into our lives," still stung. Yet Caleb's hopeful gaze was impossible to resist. "I'll be there," Raphael promised, ruffling the boy's hair, his heart aching with a love he dared not name. The days leading to the fundraiser were a blur of legal strategy and quiet moments with Caleb. Raphael found himself drawn to the boy, their interactions a tapestry of small joys, playing catch in the community center's yard, sharing stories of superheroes and justice, helping Caleb practice his lines for a school play. Each moment was a thread pulling Raphael closer to a truth he both feared and craved. Caleb's laughter, bold dreams, and uncanny resemblance to Cassandra stirred memories of a time when love had been his compass. He remembered nights with Cassandra in Brooklyn, their hands entwined as they planned a future filled with children who would inherit their ideals. Was Caleb that dream made flesh? The question haunted him, a melody he couldn't silence. at the fundraiser in a park overlooking Lake Ontario, Rochester, came alive with music and laughter. Stalls lined the grassy expanse, offering homemade pies and crafts, while a local band played soulful tunes that drifted on the breeze. Raphael arrived in a simple white shirt and jeans, a departure from his Manhattan suits, his heart pounding with anticipation. He spotted Caleb first, darting through the crowd with a group of friends, his laughter a beacon that drew Raphael's gaze. And then he saw her, Cassandra, standing by a booth, her ebony curls catching the sunlight, her presence a quiet storm of grace and strength. She wore a sundress in the color of summer roses, its fabric swaying gently as she handed out flyers. Her smile was a mask that hid the pain Raphael had glimpsed before. He approached his steps tentative, his heart a drumbeat of hope and fear. "Cassandra," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the music. She turned her eyes widening, then narrowing with a flicker of wariness. "Raphael," she replied, her tone guarded but not unkind. "I didn't expect you here." He offered a small smile, his hands in his pockets to hide their tremble. "Caleb invited me." I couldn't say no. Her expression softened at the mention of her son, but the distance between them remained a chasm carved by years of hurt. They stood silently for a moment, the festival's joy starkly contrasting with the weight of their shared past. Raphael wanted to ask about Caleb to demand the truth, but the sight of her strong, beautiful yet burdened stilled his words. Instead, he said, "You've done a fantastic job with this. Caleb's lucky to have you." Her lips curved a fleeting smile that held a trace of sorrow. "He's my everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd do anything to protect him." The words were a dagger sharp with the implication that Raphael threatened that protection. He swallowed, his heart aching with the need to reach her. "I'm not here to hurt you, Cassandra," he said, his voice low, earnest. I need to understand what happened. Why did you leave? Why do you think I left you?" Her eyes flashed with pain and she turned away, her hands gripping the edge of the booth. "Not now, Raphael," she said, her voice trembling. "Please." Before he could respond, Caleb ran up, his face alight with excitement. "Mr. Raphael, play the ring toss with me," he begged, tugging at Raphael's hand. The moment broke, and Raphael let himself be pulled away, casting a final glance at Cassandra. Her eyes followed them, a storm of emotion swirling within, and Raphael felt a spark of hope, a fragile belief that the truth was within reach, if only he could find the courage to grasp it. As the day unfolded, Raphael threw himself into the festival, playing games with Caleb, sharing cotton candy, and listening to the boy's dreams of becoming a lawyer. Each moment was a brushstroke on the canvas of his heart, painting a picture of a life he might have had. But beneath the joy, the shadow of Emilio Lopez loomed a reminder of the fight ahead. Raphael knew the legal battle would test him, but the struggle for Cassandra's trust and Caleb's future burned brightest in his soul. As the sun dipped below the lake, casting Rochester in a golden glow, Raphael vowed to fight not just for justice, but for the family he had lost, and the love that still flickered in the ashes of his heart. The Rochester skyline shimmered under a canopy of stars, the night air alive with the scent of lake water and the distant hum of crickets. Raphael Dawn stood at the edge of a lakeside resort, its pavilion aglow with fairy lights for Caleb's 7th birthday celebration. The event was a vibrant tapestry of joy, children's laughter mingling with the clink of glasses, a jazz band weaving soulful melodies through the crowd. Yet Raphael's heart was a storm, its currents stirred by the sight of Cassandra Lopez, radiant in a flowing white dress, her presence a beacon that warmed and wounded him. Caleb's invitation had brought him here, But the hope of bridging the chasm with Cassandra, of uncovering the truth about their past, kept him rooted to this moment. The pavilion was a kaleidoscope of color, with tables adorned with balloons and a towering cake that promised sweetness and celebration. Raphael watched Caleb dart through the crowd, his laughter a melody that tugged at Raphael's soul. The boy's resemblance to Cassandra was undeniable, her ebony curls, her fierce spirit. But something else whispered of Raphael's heart. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task supporting Caleb and proving to Cassandra that he was not the enemy she believed him to be. As he mingled with the guests, offering polite smiles to locals who recognized him as the lawyer, fighting for their land, Raphael's eyes kept drifting to Cassandra. She stood near the cake table, her grace effortless as she greeted guests, her smile a mask that hid the pain he had glimpsed at the fundraiser. He longed to approach her to speak the words that burned in his chest, but the memory of her rejection held him back. Instead, he watched from a distance, his heart a canvas of longing and regret. Then a shadow fell across the celebration. Tall and imposing in a tailored gray suit, Emilio Lopez strode into the pavilion, his presence a storm cloud over the festive air. Raphael's blood ran cold, the sight of the man who had framed him 7 years ago, igniting a fire of anger and resolve. Emilio's eyes locked onto Raphael's, a smirk playing at his lips, as if daring him to challenge his dominion. Beside him stood a younger man, Stephen Delgado, a businessman with a confident swagger and a proprietary arm around Cassandra's waist. Raphael's heart clenched, a surge of envy twisting within him, sharp and unbidden. Raphael Don Emilio said, his voice smooth, but laced with venom as he approached. "I didn't expect to see you at my grandson's birthday." The word grandson was the blade cutting through Raphael's fragile hope. He forced a smile, his voice steady, despite the storm within. "Caleb invited me," he said, his eyes flickering to Cassandra, who stood frozen, her expression unreadable. Stephen stepped forward, extending a hand with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Stephen Delgado, friend of the family, said, his grip firm, a silent challenge. Raphael shook his hand, his grip equally unyielding, his heart pounding with jealousy and defiance. Caleb's voice broke the tension, his slight figure bounding toward them. "Mr. Raphael, meet my mom," he cried, grabbing Raphael's hand and pulling him toward Cassandra. The crowd parted, and Raphael found himself face to face with her, the air charged with unspoken words. "Mama, this is the lawyer I told you about," Caleb said, his pride evident. Cassandra's eyes met Raphael's, a storm of emotions swirling within pain, anger, and something softer, something that flickered like a candle in the wind. "Cassandra," Raphael said, his voice low, a plea wrapped in tenderness. "You've raised an incredible boy." Her lips parted, a fleeting vulnerability crossing her face, before she masked it with a nod. "Thank you," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. Stephen stepped closer, his arm brushing Cassandra's, and Raphael felt a pang of envy, sharp and searing. He wanted to pull her aside to demand answers, but Caleb's presence grounded him, a reminder of what was at stake. As the party continued, Raphael stood by the cake table, watching Caleb blow out his candles, the crowd cheering as the flames flickered. Cassandra stood beside her son, her hand resting on his shoulder, her smile a beacon of love. Raphael's heart ached. The sight of them was a vision of the family he had once dreamed of. He remembered their plans, nights spent sketching out a future with children, a home filled with laughter. Was Caleb that dream stolen by Emilio's schemes? The question burned a flame he couldn't extinguish. Stephen's laughter drew Raphael's gaze, the man's hand resting lightly on Cassandra's back as they spoke. Raphael's fists clenched, the envy a tide threatening to drown him. He turned away, focusing on Caleb, who ran to him with a slice of cake. "Try it, Mr. Raphael." "It's chocolate," the boy said, his eyes bright. Raphael smiled, taking the plate, his heart softening under Caleb's warmth. "You're the best host, Caleb," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As the night wore on, Raphael found himself alone by the lake, the music fading behind him. The water reflected the stars, a mirror of his own restless heart. He thought of Cassandra, of the love they had shared, now tangled in lies and pain. Emilio's presence at the party was a reminder of the battle ahead, not just for the farmers, but for the truth about Caleb, about their past. Raphael closed his eyes, the breeze carrying the scent of lake water and possibility. He would fight for justice, Caleb, and the chance to rebuild what had been broken. As the stars shimmered above, Raphael felt a quiet rebellion stirring within him, a refusal to let go of the love that still burned, a vow to reclaim the family he had never stopped dreaming of. The Rochester sky burned with the hues of a fading sunset, its embers casting a golden veil over the fields that had become Raphael Dawn's battleground. The community center, a humble sanctuary of hope, stood bathed in twilight's glow, its wooden walls bearing witness to the fight for justice that had consumed him. Raphael sat at the center's worn table, his fingers tracing the edges of documents that held the weight of countless lives. Forged titles, illicit bank transfers, and the damning affidavit that named Emilio Lopez as the architect of Rochester's pain. But it was not the legal battle that haunted him tonight. It was the truth about Caleb Lopez, the boy whose smile had rekindled a fire in his heart, and Cassandra, the woman whose love still lingered like a melody he could not forget. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of strategy and emotion. Raphael had poured himself into the case meeting with farmers whose stories of loss mirrored his own, their resilience a mirror to the strength he had once found in Cassandra's eyes. Yet Caleb was the thread that wove through his days, his laughter a beacon in the storm. They had spent afternoons together playing basketball in the community center's lot, sharing stories of superheroes and dreams, Raphael teaching Caleb the art of a firm handshake, a lesson wrapped in laughter. Each moment was a brushstroke on the canvas of his heart, painting a picture of a family he had never dared to claim. But Cassandra's words at Caleb's birthday, "He's not yours," were a shadow that refused to fade, a barrier between him and the truth he longed to uncover. The courtroom in Rochester's county courthouse was a crucible, its air thick with anticipation, as Raphael prepared to face Emilio Lopez. The trial had begun, and a clash of evidence and wills drew reporters from the Rochester Democrat, the Chronicle, and the New York Times. Raphael stood before the judge, his voice steady as he presented the case: forged documents, coerced evictions, and a trail of money leading to Emilio's empire. The farmers sat in the gallery, their faces etched with hope and fear, their lives hanging in the balance with every word. Emilio, flanked by high-priced lawyers from Manhattan, sat with a smirk, his confidence a wall that Raphael was determined to shatter. As the trial progressed, Raphael's heart was a battlefield. He saw Cassandra in his dreams, her ebony curls framing a face that held strength and sorrow. He remembered their nights in Brooklyn planning a wedding under the stars, her laughter a promise of forever. But Emilio's schemes had torn them apart, framing Raphael for a crime he didn't commit, convincing Cassandra he had betrayed her. The pain of that betrayal fueled him now, but Caleb's face, his bright eyes, his bold dreams gave him courage. Was Caleb his son? The question was a flame, burning more colorful with each piece of evidence that condemned Emilio. The turning point came late one evening, as Raphael reviewed case notes in his inn by Lake Ontario. A call from Sarah, the legal aid volunteer, shattered the quiet. "Raphael, there's been an accident," she said, her voice trembling. Caleb, he was hit by a car near the school. He's in the hospital in critical condition. The world tilted, Raphael's heart plummeting as he grabbed his coat and raced to Rochester General Hospital. The sterile halls were a blur, the antiseptic scent starkly contrasting to the warmth of Caleb's laughter. He found Cassandra in the waiting room, her face a mask of anguish, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. Cassandra Raphael, said his voice breaking as he reached her. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, and the walls between them crumbled momentarily. He's in surgery, she whispered, her voice raw. He lost so much blood. They need a donor. AB positive. It's rare. Raphael's heart stopped, the coincidence too stark to ignore. I'm AB positive, he said, his voice steady despite the storm within. Let me help. Cassandra's eyes widened, a flicker of realization crossing her face, and then she broke, tears streaming as she gripped his arm. Raphael, he's your son. She sobbed the words, a thunderbolt that split his world. I'm sorry, I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. The revelation was a tidal wave washing away years of doubt and pain. Raphael pulled her into his arms, her sobs muffled against his chest, his own heart racing with a mix of joy and fear. It's okay, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I'm here now for both of you. He donated blood, the process a blur, as he watched the life-giving fluid flow, a tangible link to the boy who might be his legacy. Hours later, Caleb stabilized, his small form pale but breathing, and Raphael sat by his bedside, Cassandra's hand in his, their silence a bridge across the years of hurt. As Caleb recovered, Raphael's resolve in the courtroom burned brighter. He presented the final evidence, a recorded confession from a former aide of Emilio's, detailing the magnate's orders to displace the farmers. The judge's gavel fell, declaring Emilio guilty of fraud, falsification, and illegal displacement, sentencing him to decades in prison. The farmers cheered their victory, a testament to Raphael's tenacity. But his heart was with Caleb and Cassandra, the family he had rediscovered. That night by the lake, Raphael stood with Cassandra, the stars above a mirror of their shared past. I never stopped loving you, he said, his voice a vow. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with tears and hope. I was so lost without you, she whispered. But we're here now. They held each other, the lake's gentle waves a lullaby, and Raphael felt the pieces of his heart begin to mend, bound by the truth that had set them free. The Manhattan skyline glittered under a velvet sky, its lights a constellation of dreams that stretched toward the horizon. Raphael Dawn stood on the rooftop garden of a Central Park West condo, the city's heartbeat, a steady rhythm beneath his feet. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, carrying the scent of pine and possibility. Beside him, Cassandra Lopez stood, her ebony curls catching the moonlight, her presence a quiet symphony of strength and grace. Their son Caleb played nearby, his laughter a melody that wove through the night, a testament to the family they had reclaimed. The past months had been a journey through fire and shadow, but here, under the stars, Raphael felt the dawn of a new beginning, a love reborn from the ashes of their pain. The trial against Emilio Lopez had ended, his empire crumbling under the weight of justice. The farmers of Rochester had reclaimed their land, their lives restored by Raphael's relentless pursuit of truth. But it was the revelation of Caleb's parentage that had transformed him. The hospital room, where he had held Cassandra's hand as Caleb fought for life, was a crucible that forged their bond anew. They had spent weeks rebuilding, not just as co-parents, but as partners, their conversations a tapestry of memories and dreams. They met in coffee shops, shared quiet dinners, and watched Caleb grow stronger, his spirit bridging their past and future. The rooftop garden was their sanctuary tonight, its fairy lights twinkling like stars, brought down to earth. Raphael had brought them here, where the city's chaos met the quiet of the park, to ask the question that had burned his heart since the day he saw Cassandra again. He turned to her, his blue eyes reflecting the city's glow, his heart a drumbeat of hope and love. "Cassandra," he said, his voice low, a vow wrapped in tenderness. "We've been through so much, lies, loss, years apart. But every moment with you, with Caleb, has shown me that love is stronger than pain." He knelt, drawing a small velvet box from his pocket, its contents a promise as timeless as the stars. "Cassandra Lopez, will you marry me?" he asked, his voice trembling with the weight of 7 years of longing. Her eyes shimmered with tears, her smile a burst of sunlight at night. "Yes, Raphael," she whispered, her voice a melody of joy. "Yes, I will." Watching from his telescope, Caleb let out a whoop of delight, running to them with arms outstretched. "You're gonna be my dad forever," he cried, and they laughed, pulling him into their embrace, a family whole at last. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of planning and joy. Raphael moved his practice to include more pro bono work, inspired by the farmers and Caleb's dreams of justice. He and Cassandra chose a wedding venue overlooking the Hudson, its waters a reminder of the river that had carried them through their trials. Caleb, their ring-bearer, practiced his role with the seriousness of a future lawyer, his laughter a constant light. Raphael and Cassandra rebuilt their love, not as the young dreamers they had been, but as partners tempered by time, their bond deeper for the scars they bore. On a crisp December evening, they stood together in Central Park, the city's lights a backdrop to their vows. Cassandra, radiant in a gown of ivory lace, looked at Raphael with eyes that held a universe of love. She said, "You were always my home," her voice steady despite the tears. Raphael took her hand, his heart full. "And you are mine," he replied, sealing their promise with a kiss that tasted of forever. Standing proudly beside them, Caleb clapped with the crowd, his smile a beacon of their shared future. As they danced under the stars, the city's heartbeat, a rhythm of hope, Raphael felt the weight of the past lift. The pain of Emilio's betrayal, the years of solitude, the fear that had kept him from love. They were shadows, now dispelled by the light of his family. He looked at Cassandra, her laughter mingling with Caleb's, and knew that this was the life he had always dreamed of, a life of love, justice, and the courage to begin again. Dear reader, the journey of Raphael, Cassandra and Caleb is a testament to the power of love and justice to heal even the deepest wounds. Their story reminds us that truth can triumph and families can be rebuilt. Share this story with others, and let's inspire a world where justice and love prevail.